The chair will have the commissioners introduce themselves here.
Jared Nanke.
Hi, I'm Mel Roop.
Ted Gambogi.
Good morning, I'm Ken Mabarak.
Terry Marshall.
Good morning, I'm George Lee.
And welcome, everybody. We've got some Lamerson, Councilman Lamerson and Councilman Phil Good, current councilmen. We got Charlie Arnold back here, and we have our prestigious post-mayor, Marlon Kirkendall, sitting here in the front row. And welcome, and thanks for bringing everybody with you, I think. Right? Everybody came to see all these aristocrats in here.
They follow you everywhere, Marlon.
Yeah. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is the minutes, which Darla had completed from the last meeting. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the minutes, I have a couple of questions and corrections.
Okay.
The, on the second page, the project on Iron Springs Road, at the bottom of that page, it said that Mary Haas made a comment saying only a left turn is available. Does that need to be clarified? It was a left turn when you look at the plan with west to the left, but it's actually a right turn from the project. Should that be clarified for the record of what she, is there a way to do
So,
that?
Mr. Chairman, the lady who was speaking actually said left, but she was pointing right, assuming a right exit only. For
Well, it's a
clarity,
military right then.
right would be better.
Yeah.
Boy, would my dad have had fun with that one.
Yeah, so, okay.
So indicating a right turn
And do you have
would be
another one,
accurate.
Mel?
Pardon me?
Did you have another recommendation?
Yeah, a couple more. On the next page, the same project, it says on the action item was to also try to mitigate the slope to 14%. I believe the discussion was, it was 14, which was a lot, and we'd like to mitigate it beyond, maybe to 12, or do the best
Yeah,
job we can.
the
to-
best they can by lowering the top and
Yeah.
changing the angles and
Right,
whatever they
yeah,
can do.
but to mitigate it to
So
something
yeah,
less
less
than that.
than 14.
Yeah. The more the better.
And then on what's that, page 4, the motorcycle thing, I believe I made the motion on that one. Is that correct? Did you check the record on that?
Yes, I believe it was you who made the
Yeah,
motion.
okay, so that should be changed to reflect that. On the next page, the discussion of the cell tower on Campbell Avenue, there's a paragraph there that refers to the 80-foot pole, which is actually the previous item. So that just needs to be put up in the previous item so that there's no confusion about.
We've already changed
Yeah.
that, so the official minutes that the chair will sign reflect that correctly.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Terry, you done?
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
okay, Terry, you had something?
Yes, well, I have two or three that may not be apropos. Darla, I see on page 2 that Mr. Nanke made a motion and he seconded it.
Well, he's really good. We'll check that.
And then, also, it's maybe a spelling error. You brought up the motorcycle. Is it Mr. Knapp or Mr. Knopp?
It's spelled K-N-A-U-P.
Okay.
Yes,
Then-
we made that correction in the.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's terrible when you're a frustrated English professor.
Hey, if they got to be right.
And on the last page, I'm not sure what minor tweaks are.
Well, you know, they're little tweaky. They're just bigger tweaks. So they're Twix. Yeah.
That's all I got, George.
Well, you know, I thought we had a bunch of engineers and architects up here, but I guess we got ex-English teachers up here. And so, no. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to the first agenda item, and then I believe
Mr.
that.
Chairman, don't we need to approve the minutes as amended?
Yep,
You
yep.
can do it that way.
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand and vote.
Aye.
Okay. I'd like to welcome the current mayor in here. Yeah, hello. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go to the first regular item, RVP 10 revision of plat for Foothill Meadows.
Good morning, Katie Peterson, Community Development Department. The address for this proposed revision of plat, Foothill Meadows, is 3095 Jenny Drive. So I'll go through a summary of the proposal, zoning, site, location, give an overview, and then go through briefly the Land Development Code revision of plat and zone regulations. The existing lot is 2.59 acres. That's 113,237 square feet. The width on Jenny Drive of this lot is 250 feet. The zoning, single family, 35. There are 2 existing structures on the northern portion of the existing lot. Those conform to the required building setbacks and other regulations per the Land Development Code, Section 3.3. Lot 19A, the proposed Lot 19A is 67,191 square feet. Access from Jenny Drive, 250 feet. The proposed Lot 19B is 46,046 square feet with a width of 154 feet, and that access would be from Jack Drive around the corner. And again, the existing zoning with no proposed change is single family 35. There's the proposed site plan, as you can see. The northern portion of the existing lot would be the lot that would access from Jenny Drive, and the proposed lot in the rear, the new lot that would be split, would have access off of Jack Drive. So that proposed second lot has no existing structures. The 2 structures on the proposed existing lot at the north end of the site would retain those structures, which comply with setbacks with the proposed revision of plat. And again, both of these meet the minimum lot widths of 150 feet per lot by the zone. The minimum lot size, 35,000 square feet. The existing buildings are in compliance with the revision of plat, and the minimum setbacks are also met. So that's the proposal. If there are any questions, I can answer those.
Commissioners, on this side, No. Yeah.
I have some questions. They may not be apropos, but I'm curious why the applicant is splitting the lots rather than in the middle to the lower part. And that's one question. And the second question is, does any of the lower portion lie in the floodplain?
I'm not sure about the floodplain question. Staff from all of the departments reviewed this initial proposal, so all of them have reviewed it and approved it for coming to commission. I think the existing landowner would like to retain those buildings and remain on that portion of the lot, and had an interest in selling the southern portion.
Okay, the next question I have, I assume the reason for the division is that they're going to sell the lower lot.
I think that's their intention.
I'm wondering about drainage going down from A down to B. I don't know if that is pertinent to our discussions here.
I mean, they'll have to come in with a building permit and go to, engineering and everything, so.
So at the time of building permit application submittal, if that portion of the lot is proposed for any structures, then that would go through the permit process and would be reviewed and mitigated with review by all the departments, including Public Works.
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I had similar thoughts or comments as Mr. Marshall. I think it might behoove us all to maybe hear from the applicant, see what their desires are and what their plan is.
Okay, do we have the applicant here? Oh,
Oh, no.
oh,
We don't have the applicant, but we have the author of the document. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Michael Haywood with Nexus Southwest. My offices are at 212 South Marina. Yes, there is some FEMA floodplain along the southern portion. The intent of not dividing it in the middle was to preserve topographically. The existing structures are on high ground. There's a large swale and slope that goes down to the bottom ground. Yeah, I suppose you guys saw that in your tour. But there is a dynamite tree with the coolest tree fort in the floodplain area. So in the event of a catastrophe, one can always gain access to that tree. There you are.
Can you rebuild that tree house if it gets flooded out?
Well, you'd want to stock it with some provisions, Mr. Maverick, you know. Proper planning prevents, well,
has that
anyhow.
got a building permit on it, that tree house?
Oh, most assuredly, yeah. The limbs were inspected, no, I mean, you know me, I'm silly. But anyhow, that it is the intent to sell the lower portion. They do intend to preserve the upper. Their architect is looking at some features to possibly make some modifications to the upper parcel, but it is their intent to sell the lower parcel. It does comply and exceed all of the code requirements, and the areas of inundation in the floodplain, there are areas outside of the floodplain of more than sufficient area. Ultimately, as everyone indicates, a building permit will go back to all of the parties, and the flood control district will no doubt require specifics of elevation certificates, guaranteed location out of harm's way. So those things are being and have been addressed.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. When I visited the property yesterday, to answer your question, I think that lot 19A and 19B is divided about where the landscaping on 19A stops. Is that about right?
Yes, at the toe of their slope, pretty much.
And south of 19B is another property that's fenced in that would be in the same plane if it is a floodplain.
Yes. Yeah, we won't comment on the fencing and the floodplain, but yeah, it would be in a floodplain.
That's all I have.
George?
Mike, I have a question. Does the driveway to Site A have access from both roads?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right now it is that, well, half moon kind of access, so it does create that circuitous.
But it's not a one-way drive that they have to come
No.
in on Jenny and then go down? They can go either way.
Either way.
Thank you.
Does any member of the public would like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners, is there a motion on this?
I move that we approve RVP 18-00010 to subdivide the lot into two.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. All right, now, who all in the audience is here from the Prescott View along Bradshaw Drive project? Let me have a show of hands. Okay, that's what we thought, and so what we're gonna do to expedite things is have that your item moved up to the next item on the agenda, and so we'll move that along. This is a preliminary public hearing on that, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on receiving input. We'll want good sample input. We've got quite a few letters, et cetera, and so we'll just move that project up now. So, George, are you ready with that one?
I am, sir. So this project is a request to amend the general plan designation for a piece of property and amend the zoning for a piece of property. And while we have a preliminary lot layout that we gave you as an example of what the developer might do, they do not have a subdivision plat submitted to us at this time for formal review. We can use that lot layout for discussion and consideration, but it could change along the way. We also understand that this is a sensitive piece of property. There are a lot of neighbors nearby who could be affected by the development. So when we agendized this item, it's for information at this stage, to take public input at this stage, and then at a future meeting, we will have it back for potential action by this body if you choose to take action on it. So the property is actually made up of two parcels. It's a little bit odd that this small triangular piece shows as a separate parcel. It's under the same ownership. They would have to be combined together as part of a future subdivision plat, so it really doesn't make any difference at this stage in the process. The current general plan designations for the area show quite a mix. The yellow, brighter yellow, is all single-family designations. That's generally anything from single-family 6, which is a minimum 6,000 square foot lot, up to single-family 35, which are 35,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. The brownish color, or multifamily zoning, actually would allow for apartments depending on the size of the lots. Our multifamily zoning allows single-family uses, and you'll see that much of this area, while it's designated on the general plan for multifamily, is actually built as single-family, developed as single-family lots. And the same for this, which is part of the eastern portion of downtown. And then the, not quite sure what color that is, it's pink on my map, but looks purple up there, is a commercial designation in the general plan. That commercial designation generally allows for residential uses as well as commercial uses. When this property was zoned to a commercial designation many years ago, it had some limitations placed on it to prevent single-family development to occur. Those limitations were part of the rezoning that occurred back then. As a result of its designation as business general, and I'll show you the zoning in just a moment, and the limitation on residential, we've shown it in the general plan map as solid commercial use throughout. The actual zoning in the area also helps give you an idea of what is surrounding the property. Generally, whatever the zoning designation is, the lot sizes are going to be similar to that zoning designation. Generally, they're slightly larger, but not always. The development just to the south is a rather unique development in Prescott. It's a co-housing development with a huge amount of common area and relatively small lots for the individual homes. But the zoning designation is single-family 9. That's a minimum 9,000 square feet. When a project like this comes in as a planned area development, that's what the PAD stands for, the developer has the option to figure out his total density based on that 9,000 square foot minimum, but then create smaller lots and larger open spaces. So that's exactly what they did as part of their development process. The idea there is that if you take the whole property and divide it up by the number of lots, they're at least 9,000 square feet per house. The properties to the east are SF12, minimum 12,000 square foot lots. To the west, single-family 9. These are standard single-family 9, so they're 9,000 minimum square feet per lot. There's one parcel here that we expect to be developed as a single-family home in the future. That's a minimum 35,000. That's actually a carryover zoning. I'm not quite sure why we have a single parcel zoned 35,000 square feet, but that's existing and will be developed as a 35,000 square foot single-family lot. Normally, as I mentioned before, under the general plan, normally under zoning, a business general designation allows you to put single-family homes in. If this were a normal zoning, if this had been a normal zoning back in the day, in the late 80s when it occurred, might have been mid-80s when it occurred, normally you would not be going through this process for someone to come in for a single-family development. Rezoning's not necessary. At that time, limitations were placed on the zoning, eliminating the single-family use. It was intended and zoned for a resort hotel to go on that location. Numerous problems with trying to build a resort hotel up there, including access, including water and sewer utilities, sizing of water and sewer utilities, basically prevented that from ever happening. The property's been vacant for a long time. The zoning's been in place and is set as a business general designation. The current proposal is to amend the zoning partially to remove the limitation on single-family development, and to specifically designate it for single-family development. The proposal is to change the BG, Business General, to a single-family 6, minimum 6,000 square foot lots. It would allow for up to 40 single-family detached homes and up to 11 attached townhomes on the property. That possibility is something that would have to be reviewed and approved through a subdivision plat process by this body. From a staff perspective, the zoning to residential makes more sense than a commercial designation up there in that location. But the proposed SF6 is potentially less compatible than some other districts would be. The predominance of zoning in the area is a larger single-family lot size, SF9 being pretty standard throughout the city, but also pretty standard in that area. That would affect the number of lots that could be constructed if that zoning were to be changed from 6 to 9. At this stage in the process, because there's so much concern about what's going to or what could happen on the property, staff has not made a recommendation to you on action on either the general plan or the rezoning. We believe it's important to have the public, the neighbors, have an opportunity to provide input to you as to the appropriateness of this. You ultimately will have the opportunity to recommend a zoning other than that requested by the applicant. And should you choose to do that, and if the applicant chooses not to pursue that alternative recommendation, then they would have to come back and start their project over, in effect. One other thing to consider, and I'm going to put up the preliminary lot layout, one thing to consider with that is that it is preliminary. We do not have a thorough staff review of this layout because we typically do that with a formal application and review process. At this stage, because we don't have such a process, we've only done a preliminary, I won't call it cursory because we don't do cursory reviews of anything, a preliminary review of the project's layout and its ability to function. Obviously, if any of you have been up and looked at the property, there's a significant fall across the property. This being higher ground closer to the road, this being significantly lower as you go this way. The Bradshaw Street alignment, as it comes up here, involves some fairly significant terrain change from the street level to the existing level of these properties. These are the townhomes, a Phase 2 attached single-family townhomes. These being the single-family detached, more standard houses on relatively small lots as compared to the rest of the neighborhoods. Staff's available to answer any questions you may have about the process thus far, but I believe, again, the best opportunity or best use of your time today is to hear from the public, take into consideration some of their issues. It will also allow staff to take those concerns into consideration in working with the developer to bring you back something at a future meeting that makes a little more sense to, has a little more information, maybe makes it more compatible.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner, yes.
do I have the opportunity to ask a newbie question?
Absolutely, sir.
So this proposed zoning is single-family 6, which means 6,000 square feet.
6,000 square foot minimum lot size, right?
Does that include the townhouses?
The zoning would include the townhouses, but under the land development code, the townhouses are treated slightly differently. The minimum lots can be as small as 3,000 for each individual townhouse. So as you add them up, a four townhouse building is going to have 3,000 apiece for each one. And just for clarity, townhouses by our zoning code are a single-family ownership scheme. You own the ground and a portion of the building. It's unlike a condominium where you only own airspace within the building. So these townhouses would actually be lots. The property owner would own the ground either front and back, or on the corner units, the end units, they would own some adjacent property on the sides. They are surrounded throughout the design by open space. That open space is part of the requirement for the townhouse development.
Well, it said single-family attached home, so wouldn't that be just, appear like a duplex, but each, there'd be a parcel for each side, but
That's
you
correct.
can only have two, is my understanding.
No.
You can't
These
have
are-
four,
these are
because then
four.
it pushes it to multifamily, and they're not asking for that.
No, townhouses are considered attached single-family. So they're permitted in single-family zoning.
Is that right? I thought it was just two was the limit, and then you push.
Under the building code, 2 is the most you can do under the residential building code, and then it goes to the commercial building code, but it doesn't affect the zoning.
Okay, Mel?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the staff for not putting this on the agenda for action. There's clearly more information needed on this. I appreciate that. And I'd like to ask everyone here to please don't tease me about my tie anymore. I've gotten that from a lot of people this morning.
I think it's a fine tie.
Thank you.
We can vote on that later.
Oh, yeah, please. Is that a private session? I read the staff report and the letters from the neighborhood who are stakeholders in this, and I visited this site. I'd like to visit it again, and I'll have that opportunity. Changing the zoning to residential is, I think, clearly appropriate for the reasons that staff noted. But there are lots of ways of doing residential. The issues are how many units are appropriate given the site, and what kind of housing types and how they're sited, and the impact on the neighborhood. The proposal would be appropriate, I realize this is a draft, and it won't look like this. It is appropriate for a flatland project, and that's clearly what this was. That would be appropriate in Phoenix, maybe. But in a steep hillside area with the concern for the environment and so forth, I think some more analysis is needed of that. I compared the densities that have been discussed in the letters and so forth, 6,000 square feet versus 9,000 versus 12,000, and I ran some numbers just to compare them on an equal basis. So I converted each of those to units per acre, which is a common practice. In other words, if you had a piece of flat land and you were given 6,000 square feet, how many units could you put in versus 9,000 and so forth? The increase in density from 9,000 square feet to 6,000 is a 50% increase in density. The difference between 6,000 square feet per unit and 12,000 square feet per unit is a 100% increase in density in comparative terms. And those are the densities that are in the surrounding area, 9,000 and 12,000. This project has a great name, Prescott View. The views from there are incredible. They are incredible. And I'm sure that they're going to want to maximize the views for the people that buy there. Conversely, you can see everything down there, and they can see the site. It's a very visible site. I would like to request before the next meeting additional information for us to review specifically, and we only had a small copy of the that proposed site plan, and a lot of the detail wasn't visible, the topography and elevations and so forth. I would like to see before the next meeting and the week before the next meeting, so we'd have time to review it, 50-scale site plan of a copy of this, plan of just the existing topo without anything on top of it, a preliminary grading concept. I don't believe there were any proposed grades on this, and I realize it's kind of premature, but you can do a feasibility study of a simple concept grading plan to see the amount of grading that would be required and where. It appears to be a lot of mass grading on this site. And also, I think we should request alternative site plans with units showing what could be done if you were required to do 9,000 square foot lots or 12,000 square foot lots, and minimize the grading on the site to the extent possible, which would be a cost saving to the developer and would go further to retain the hillsides of Prescott. That's all my comments.
Thank you. I've taken notes.
Thank you.
Okay, any more over here, Ken?
Thank you, George. I want to start out by saying, when I looked at that, if you could put that zoning map back up. And I do have a question for you, George. Is our purpose today more to look at the rezoning or that site plan?
The site plan is only for general information.
Thank you.
The action items will be general plan amendment and rezoning of the property.
Because I looked at this as just that. It was a bifurcated situation. That primarily what we're talking about today is the appropriateness of that type of zoning that they're requesting, and then looking at the site plan after and if we look at that zoning. Is that the type of procedure you envision, George?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Thank you. When I look at this zoning map, and you started to mention an agreement, and I think it was agreement 1343, is that the resolution that council made back in 89, was it?
I believe it was 89, 87, 89.
Can you point out or tell us how close to this site was what was then a proposed Walmart shopping center site?
So the adjacent site is a care home, senior living apartment and care. The next project down is called Bradshaw Apartments. That Bradshaw apartment site was originally intended as a Walmart site.
Yes,
and that
thank
zoning
you.
occurred separate from this, but about the same time period.
That might explain why this became, I mean, I look at that zoning map and I say, oh my God, there's almost every zoning we have there, short of, we even have business general, which is a very quite different than business regional, which is not there. But I see SF12, and I'm not going to recite them all. I see everything up there. My concern is the zoning appropriateness. I can tell you that I want to hear from the applicant, and I certainly would love to hear from some of the neighbors. I looked at the packet that you had prepared for us, and oftentimes when we have a standing room only type of crowd, the letters we get are just redundant, and they keep reciting the same thing. I have to say, in this case here, we've had a couple of cases in the last 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years that stood out for me. This is one, too. I think it was the opponents, the neighbors, have put together a well-rehearsed packet, and very respectful. I saw just a couple letters that said basically not in my backyard, but most of the people said there's going to be something here, and let's figure out how to make it compatible with where we are. So I'm anxious to hear from the applicant and the neighbors, but I just wanted to point out that this was a well-presented opposition for those of you who did. And I certainly have some very serious concerns in reference to the zoning as it stands now until I hear more. Thank you.
Okay, down here.
One question, George. Has staff reviewed any engineering on this site up to this time with the applicant?
We have a process that involves an initial internal quick meeting called a pre-application meeting. We've had a pre-application meeting with them prior to their submittal of this application. Part of that discussion involves engineering. So there was some discussion about water line sizing, looping of water lines, pressure zones, those types of things. No engineering plans have been submitted to us. Normally that is submitted with a subdivision plat. It's not something that's typically done with the zoning stage. I will point out that we see a preponderance of applications come in with a rezoning if one's required and a plat together, but there's no requirement to do that. And in this case, they've chosen to do the rezoning separate from the plat.
I have one more question. Is the engineering going to be part of the preliminary plat or the final plat?
The answer is both. Preliminary engineering design and engineering reports are required for the preliminary plat. After a preliminary plat's been approved, then a serious development of engineering plans to the level of permitting is required before a final plat is approved. So there's a little bit of a ramp up of cost and review at the engineering level for preliminary plat, and then a steep ramp up before final plat to get all of the engineering designs in a form that can be constructed.
Thank
And
you.
the city's engineering department is part of the review process for both of those stages.
I don't have a question, George, but I do have a statement, and that is, after driving the site and looking at the different homes up there, I think reducing the lot sizes to 6,000, I think it changes the complete complexion of the neighborhood. So that's my comment.
Yep, okay. Any other questions for George? Is the applicant here? Yeah. Why don't you come up and give us, state your name and give us a little bit of an overview here on what you're wanting to do.
Good morning.
My name is David Benner. I'm with Granite Basin Engineering. My address is 1981 Commerce Center Circle, Suite B, Prescott. So what you see before you is essentially a proposed residential subdivision. Is currently zoned BG, which was through a case in the 80s, I believe, for the Steiger Hill rezone. It was supposed to be a event center there, essentially. And so in looking at the surrounding land use, SF 9, 35, 12, all around it, we had looked at several different lot sizes based on the topography on the property. We felt it was prudent to attempt a mass graded subdivision, and that's why the lot sizes are so small. That is permitted within the underlying zoning, the BG zoning, and as a PAD, I believe. It's split up in two phases. We have the initial phase, which is the center core on the east side of the property, and then the west side, the west half, is a future phase where we're proposing some townhomes to be cut into the hillside there. As you know, the views are pretty well up, are very nice up there. I've been going up here since I was a kid. It used to be called DQ Hill. It's a great project, I think. I think it's necessary to have, I think we need some lots like this, some product of this size in this location, at least proximate to downtown. There's just not much of that available. We have been sensitive to some of the surrounding properties. It will be cut in for the most part on the upside against the Point of View Road to the east. So the lots abutting that, those properties there, will be cut down quite a bit. So they won't be right out the back door of the neighboring properties. All setbacks are proposed based on the underlying zoning, or the SF6 zoning. We have, it's a good transitional use too. If you look at the SF12 and some of the other surrounding zonings, and then the BG off to the north with the old folks home to the north, and then the Bradshaw Crossing apartments beyond that. There is the SF9 basically in all directions. We have the multifamily high density immediately to the further west across from Bradshaw. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions as far as the engineering and whatnot. We haven't done detailed engineering at this point, but we have a pretty good sense of what's going on and what we need to do.
On those townhomes, you heard a discussion about, well, is it attached two unit, or can it be 4 unit, or how many units total are you looking at having?
I don't have the map in front of me, but I believe it was 12.
We said 11, but those are structures, so.
No, there's 11 units, 2 buildings with 4 and 1 building with 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We didn't have that, did we? I don't think, yeah, okay. So there's only 11 total units, not, you know, multiply it times 2 or 4 or whatever.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Each building is a unit.
David, I hate to be the arbiter of political correctness, because I certainly am not. But they're called senior.
Senior. Oh. Hey, they're old folks. That's not a.
And we typically don't use the word senior in
All
this
due
room.
respect.
So,
All respect. I had that one coming. What would we do without you?
Yeah. So what do you consider yourself, Ken?
whew, tired.
Any other questions for the app? Okay, thank you very much. We've got a lot of letters, and in summary, what we saw was, of course, questions about the density, questions about Bradshaw Drive in terms of traffic, and the design of the road. It's fairly narrow, and it's, you know, sharp corners, and also that there's no sidewalk or any pedestrian facilities if you have as many units as there are at the top with Manzanita Village and thing. There's always been a need of some kind of connectivity without having to jump into a vehicle along there, and whether this project could be part of that solution or not, that's a question. But those are the main things that were identified in the letter. So what we're going to do is take public input, and if you have a representative to step forward and you know, kind of summarize a certain area or concern or support for, whichever way you want to communicate, and we'll just take a number of inputs to make sure we cover all bases here, and then of course move this item on to the next meeting if that's appropriate. It might not, but the next meeting's the 31st.
correct.
But it may or may not be an action item depending on what everybody provides as far as input. Oh, Gene Wilcox, did we miss you as far as introducing? This is, she snuck
No,
in on us?
I'm just an ordinary citizen.
No, you're not. Okay.
I came to speak as a nearby resident, and a few people have asked me to speak on behalf of the residents of Manzanita Village, but there may be other individuals who would like to express their opinion as well. I did send in a letter which summarizes my point of view. I would like to ask each commission member whether they have actually visited the site. I heard from 2 that they have. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've all visited the site. So you know very well that Bradshaw Drive is a hairpin curve, 15 miles an hour, no shoulders. There's one little pull out at the end of the curve, but it is a very dangerous road, especially when there is ice on the road. There's a school bus that goes up there at least 2 times a day, sometimes 4, and then there are some special smaller school vans that go up to pick up special ed kids. So I would ask you to consider the safety of the children and the residents in looking at the appropriate zoning for this site. I'm very pleased to hear that most of you feel the zoning is too dense for this site. We agree. The access points onto Bradshaw need to be thought very carefully for the site distance, and it seems that the only appropriate access point would be along the long stretch of Bradshaw Drive, which is, as George has shown, the section that's at the bottom part of the map. 2 access points could be very problematic. One access point with possibly a cul-de-sac might work. The access points on the inside curb of that hairpin curb have no sight distance, and it is very dangerous. Even when you're coming around the curve, you can't tell when somebody's coming up the hill at you. And there have been so many times when I encounter a car that's crossed the center line, and I have to almost stop to make sure that they see me and they get back into their lane. This site just isn't appropriate for this kind of density. The cuts and fills are also problematic. We see those all over Prescott, and I think it just ruins the aesthetics of this city. There's so much opportunity to design projects with the landscape in mind. A good example is the Tenney Homestead project that's up Senator Highway off of Nathan Lane. That came in for approval when I was on the council in 2013, and I thought they did a very good job of designing it so that the rooftops just blend into the hillside. You hardly know it's there. In the distance, you see rooftops, but they become part of the hillside. That would be appropriate here. I think this plan needs to go back to the drawing board. It's just not ready yet. It's an engineered plan, but it's not a site-designed plan. And that's what would make all the difference in the world to the neighborhood and to the city of Prescott. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr.
Your name and location.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. Gary Palmer. I live on Point of View. I'm a new resident of 8 months, and the site plan is called Prescott View, and I'm on Point of View. And in the little description of the home that I purchased, it says that the views include Thumb Butte. Well, if we go to the next page, thank you, and just rotate it counterclock, thank you. So my lot is this one right down here in the corner. So any homes that go in there, my view is gone. So not that that's a big deal, you know, it happens all the time. I think my concern is the traffic and safety. And as been pointed out, down below, it's 38 feet wide, Bradshaw. And these lines that describe maybe the drive is somewhat misleading in that the road is so narrow enough that the inside lane that connects to that street that they're proposing is 10 feet wide. In Arizona state law, the minimum average is 12 feet. So you can see that this is way too narrow. And as you'll see later on, it's very deceiving because it's a flat map. Next page, please, George. Thank you. And rotate it. Thank you so much. Little underexposed, but there are 200 homes. I stopped counting after 200. And what happens is that, you know, I don't have to go to the Daytona 500 or the Indianapolis 500 because on this corner right here where I live, I can sit on my deck and I can watch those cars come around turn 4 and head for the home stretch. And I gotta say, the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is not happening. These cars are moving. And the reason that these homes don't use their exit point here is that it exits into 69 and they can only go east. So if these people, 175 of them, want to go to the west and to come down here to City Hall, they need to go down Bradshaw. Now, hypothetically, if Bradshaw closes and we need another exit, we need to go down McDonald, and then we have to go down Eastman. And if anybody's been down either of those streets, McDonald is very wide and smooth, but Eastman is very narrow. They park their cars. It actually becomes a single lane up and down. Very dangerous, very undulated. I've got a Jeep, and you know, that's the only car I'll take up and down that drive. So it's going to cause, I'm not even going to go there. So next slide, please. And by the way, 60 cars an hour pass by. So every minute, bam, bam. Now, again, going back to the idea of the flat map, here is a horizontal straight line. This line below that is kind of difficult to see, but it's red. It starts down here. That's why these people gas it, because my house is right here, and I get to sit there and watch them accelerate up to this point, which is about 120 feet from my back door. This is where, this line here is where the road is going to enter onto Bradshaw. And it's already, it has a 6% downgrade, and it's probably 15 feet lower than this point here. So line of sight, here's my house, line of sight from somebody trying to exit here is very narrow, 75 feet at best. Next page, please. Okay, and then bring the slide down just a little bit. Okay, so I stood out in the roadway at about the position of where the cars would try to exit, and you can see how steep that is, and you can see the hill. So this up here is time code, and it's 3.5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7 seconds. So from the very first frame that I can see that car to it running into my driver's side door is about 3.5 seconds. Now that's on a dry road, nobody there, sun is shining, and these cars are flying by. So if somebody's trying to exit on that road that they propose to put in, you've got about 3 seconds to be able to gas it, get out, and get going. So it's beyond my comprehension that something like this would be allowed. I work in the film business, and for the last 20 years, I've taken probably 30 safety classes from the major studios that they put them on. And the reason that the studios do this is because they get sued for things. And every time they get sued for something, they make us take a safety class. So whether I'm on location, whether I'm on a ship crossing the Atlantic, whether I'm in a hotel, whether I'm in City Hall shooting, there are certain laws and certain things that we need to be aware of as a director of photography, that I have maybe 50 people, maybe 100 people under my supervision, and I need to make sure that it's safe. So I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a city planner and so on and so forth, but to me, to have 3 seconds to be able to get out on a dry, sunny road when it rains, when the monsoon, when it snows, when the kids, when the buses, a bus is going to have a very difficult time stopping on a 6% grade, which is down here in this bottom right-hand corner. It's very steep, and I'm encouraged that you were able to go out there and survey the lot and see that there's that peak. It's an arc, and those cars got to speed up, and then they got to slow down. But you really, when they come over that point, it's about 3 seconds, 1001, 1002, 1003. Now I've got a BMW. Now I can do it. My family is into racing and they race Porsches, and I don't have a problem in making that exit in 3 seconds, but it's not the way I drive. I'm a senior citizen, and I'm proud of it, and I just like to take things safe, and it's traffic and safety and the community safety is an issue, and the road that they're going to put in there is going to be very dangerous. Unless they plan on widening it to 3 lanes, or, you know, with shoulders and so on and so forth. Right now, that 10-foot lane, you can see that I'm out there in the lane, and the car has to veer off to the right to miss me. And then it's only like if I really stood where where I would be as a driver, it's going to be even less amount of time. And I won't take up any more of your time, and I do appreciate this opportunity to share this with you.
Yeah, thank you. One thing you mentioned was these safety classes. It'd be maybe a good idea to bring those in and have all the citizens in Prescott take those safety classes. That might be part of the solution here on that road.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Commissioner Gambogi and I were out there day before yesterday to look at this site and actually to address the whole crowd that was in here. We're very lucky to be here today. That very curve that you guys are all talking about coming into this, as we were pulling into it, there was a gentleman coming at us. I'm twisted around for the direction, so I'm not going to use north and south. And
so that's the curve right there?
The fella actually, I don't know. The fella actually crossed the yellow line. And Ted commented on it as he was driving. He said, "Hey, you got 2 vitally important individuals here." And
1.5.
and ironically, as we left, Ted did the same thing, just crossed that line. So we know it's a very tight location. My question for you, however, would be, what would you feel the appropriate use of this property would be?
I think higher, like I'm in an S12, they want to do 6,000, 40 homes, 11 townhomes. I think put upscale homes in there that would elevate the price of our homes. For me, I was told by my lawyer that the view is worth 20 to 25% of my home. And on point of view, with the view, now it's going to diminish. I can take a bath for 150 grand or whatever and move on.
In other words, you'd like to see upscale homes?
Oh, that would improve, and then have them sprinkled, just like the little red dots that we see on the map. Have them sprinkled and spread out and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public got something that we haven't discussed?
Yeah, I won't touch on the traffic issue since that's been covered. I just wanted to show, I'm going to give some slides here.
Do you need a pointer?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Here you go. Be careful, it's right.
It looks like
My name is Richard Clare. I live at 268 Point of View, and our home borders this area. Well, just to start, I just wanted to show you that curve, just so everyone sees that, and then you can put the next one up. Okay, these are the homes that are going to border this lot. Now, my home is right here, and the line that where the fence would go on this property that's being introduced would go right along here. So I would be looking out my door. My rear door would be where our view would be about 20 feet from that fence. And if there was a home built, it would be built 20 feet further. And my view, 180 degrees of my view, when I purchased my home, it advertised 360-degree views. And the home was previously owned by Kate Rensler, which is a member of the Forbes family, and she sadly passed away. All of her artwork is in the library. About 16 or 17 pieces of her artwork are in the library. And she had a little art room in the back, which is kind of primitive, and it'll be approximately about 8 feet from the fence line that is proposed. And like I said, the primary reason I bought this home was for the view. And if I lose that view, I mean, my home is, it's gone. It's just, so I just wanted to emphasize, and I didn't want to emphasize on the road, Gary covered that, but the view from my property and all these homes here is going to be degraded due to this plan as it goes. Now, if you look, you can see the line along the top edge here is higher elevation. And the homes would be built on this higher elevation, which would block all the views from these homes. And my proposal would be to have a buffer zone between the SF-12 and whatever else is built there, just so it doesn't compromise the views and of the SF-12 homes. So that's the one thing I wanted to cover. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're looking at. And you can see the landscape here that goes down. And if they build homes, they could build them, if they built them down lower, then it would bring the elevation of the homes down lower. And then it wouldn't obstruct my view and the view of all the SF-12 homes. And these are all custom homes around here. To put in, cracker box homes and that in a plan of the urban nature that it is would really degrade the neighborhood and the value of the homes. So that's all I had.
Thank you.
Can I get your name and address?
I second that.
Can I get your name and address?
Richard Clare, 268 Point of View.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I guess we don't know David, you're still here, aren't you, yeah, we don't, we don't know but what you may be mass grading and lowering that upper section anyway to where, May I approach yeah.
Go through a couple quick responses here. I didn't apologize for missing the start of the meeting. We were at the end, so we were kind of thinking it was going to be a little bit later, so we kind of missed out on some of that. I'll respond just briefly to some of the comments made, specifically in regard to the grading on those particular lots, which would be the east line of the subdivision. As I mentioned, those will be cut down up to 10, 15 feet. So it will not be at grade. It will not be a huge obstruction to their back window or whatever. And we are sensitive to what people are saying, though. And so, we would be willing to even increase that rear setback a little bit as long as we're able to get the products that are intended to go on those lots. That could be increased from 25 to 30, 40, whatever it may be. But we're willing to work with the residents. We're also willing to consider some type of screening there. But I think that might work against some of their concerns as far as their views off to the west towards Thumb Butte and whatnot. But point is I think we're willing to work with these people. And I also wanted to remind everyone here that the whole purpose of this is to solicit this feedback and to go back and make revisions to the site plan. Of course, this isn't perfect because we just started it. We're conceptualizing here what we want to do and introducing this and presenting this to staff and to the public so that we can get feedback and we can make revisions as necessary. As far as degrading home prices and all that, I couldn't disagree more. I think, somebody here, I'm from this town, I grew up here, and I probably said the same thing about everybody here at one point. And so it's, the NIMBY thing, the not in my backyard, it just doesn't really stand well with me. I believe in development. I'm also very environmentally sensitive. I think you can't stop development, but you can do it right, and you can do it well and plan it out, and so that's what we're here to do. But you can't just, not everything can be open space in parks, unfortunately. Regarding traffic, the site-generated traffic, I don't have the numbers with me, but that's for another discussion. As far as the safety and whatnot of the existing roadway, yes, we're very well aware of the hairpin turn, of the narrowness of the existing roadway. And I suppose we could propose to widen this road all the way down to Gurley for everybody that uses it, but that doesn't seem like a very productive use of private money. I think that doesn't really bode well with me. I think that's a community benefit. We'd certainly be willing to participate, but not be solely responsible for that. As far as the turn lanes and whatnot, the speeds on that road, I am aware that, yes, there is a sight distance issue at the high point there. I also want to remind you that that's a 90-degree turn, and so, we don't design roads for drunk drivers. If everything in a perfect world, if we had perfect sight distance, there would be no character anywhere. You go to Jerome, Bisbee, some of these other communities, they're very European, and they're absolutely not to any standard. And I'm not proposing we don't follow a standard, but just trying to remind everybody that that's what gives neighborhoods character. It's not just these grid layout, like a Phoenix subdivision or whatever. It's part of the, and please save your comments for later. You can hit me up, flog me on the way out, but let me try to get through what I'm doing here. So the vertical curve, though, and in response to Mr. Palmer's comment, he spoke very eloquently, I might add, and maybe we can pull him on as a consultant or something as far as the safety of that road. But the the 25-mile-an-hour posted speed and the wideness of the road, the vertical curve there, are all things that can be mitigated. But again, I just want to remind you that we don't design roads for drunk drivers or for babies driving cars either. And so we have to assume at some point that responsible adults are going to be using these roads and not flying down there at 60, 70 miles an hour, whatever it is. There's plenty of measures that can be implemented as far as traffic safety to provide warning and notice to drivers of what's up ahead. There was a comment made, I believe, by Mr. Palmer as well, as far as the access from this area. All of South Prescott really kind of has this issue as far as access. There's really no way to get east. It's a regional problem. People can turn left on 89 if they go out Robinson, I guess it is. But yeah, it's kind of you kind of just have to, close your eyes and hit it. It's a bit of a sketchy left turn. I couldn't agree more. Now coming out on further east, I believe that is a right only. But that's a much bigger problem than what we're talking about here. That's an existing problem that needs to be dealt with. There are numerous roads and connectivity, so you could really get out of here any number of ways through Virginia Street, Senator Highway, whatnot. Point of the matter is, though, is that this is an existing problem, and improvements to Bradshaw Drive, it's an existing roadway. I'm not sure there's not a whole lot we can do about what's there now. To say, though, that nobody else is welcome in there or they need to have $1 million homes or whatever, I just don't think is very reasonable. And especially if you consider the alternative of what's allowed there by right now. And so would you rather have homes or an event center, 4 or 5 story resort, whatever it is, and the traffic associated with that is far and above anything that will be generated by this site. Somebody made the comment about the sidewalks and connectivity and whatnot. We do have sidewalks internally. There is no sidewalk on Bradshaw. To put a sidewalk on Bradshaw, I think, is a liability. You all know how steep it is. You're going to put ADA ramps on there and sidewalk ramps. I mean, you're inviting people to go down, and I mean, to me, that's just that's not very practical, and I don't think it's a very wise decision. I don't think it's prudent. Certainly, we're all about that, the trails, the connectivity, and we would want that to be incorporated somehow. If you look at the bottom, the southwest corner of the property, you have the park over there. And so we would certainly entertain some sort of connectivity and whatever we can do along our property internally and possibly even along the frontage to sort of facilitate the movement of people, pedestrians towards that park, which kind of brings me to something I forgot about the emergency access. Somebody mentioned, I believe it was Mr. Palmer again, he was referring to Eastman Drive and getting out of there. And yes, it's a terrible road, but I also want to remind you that we're actually working on the capital improvement plans for that right now as we speak on behalf of the city. There's also a regional detention basin proposed right on the property. Could you point that out for me, George? Or do you have a pointer? Yeah, that one right there. You had it. That right there.
Here? Yeah.
So, big park proposed right there. Regional stormwater detention. Full roadway improvements all the way from Gurley all the way up to Devereaux, I believe. Does not include sidewalk on the upper part because it is so tight and narrow, specifically the upper section of Eastwood south of Hillcrest. But from the park down, we do have sidewalk proposed on, I believe it's the west side. And we're also doing some park improvements and whatnot, access to Acker Park. So, but to, I guess, the connectivity, there were concerns about the connectivity of the sidewalk and whatnot. And so what's there now? And, is my question. And are we the only ones being expected to participate in something like that?
Well, what the letter said was that now there are pedestrians walking down on Bradshaw Drive itself, which is probably the least safe. And, I wasn't really aware. I don't know how many here have seen pedestrians. Have you seen pedestrians? Oh, okay. Well, don't do it anymore.
Well, there should be some provision for pedestrians. There's no question about it, because it is dangerous. What can we do to facilitate that? I have not seen the comments. I have not seen the letters. Happy to go through them and address and hopefully even speak to each individual one-on-one and try to address their concerns as best we can. We can't make everybody happy, and you know that.
Right. Well, since we're not making a decision on this, then we want to go ahead and let any of the public now speak that has some different perspective on this that hasn't been discussed, or some additional point that hasn't been brought out. So
absolutely. And I just also wanted to point out the SF9 to the south.
But what you're doing right now, what we would hope that would take place between the next public hearings, or when it goes to council, et cetera, to where you're getting this community input, and then you're going to work in the best you can and mitigate the different situations, change the plan altogether, whatever you think you can do. So,
yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes, sir. Your name and I see Jeff back there.
If you could put the site plan up on the screen, please. My name is Barney Blashill, and if you go down point of view, right toward, got a pen here, Gary? Go right down here. This is my home, right down in this area. And your property comes from this straight down, all the way down. There's the little inlet there. Property here, Gary's property there. Anyway, questions I have is there a requirement on this particular plan for square footage of? Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry. Is there a determination of what square footage do you plan on putting on these particular lots?
No, that's a building.
Is there a particular dimension that I don't know that you require? Also, are these 1 or 2 floor plans? Is there a height restriction on the structures? What is the setback on these particular plans, where they could be set away so that there isn't a wall that goes straight down that line and blocks not only the view, but also is just sort of confining for what we have right now, where we have open space and are able to see the views. Those are my questions, and I'd appreciate some answers.
Okay, well, back again with Granite Basin Engineering, those type of comments you might work in, and you could answer those questions, such as a rendering or the general concept of what your building structures might be at the next meeting.
Yes, sir, absolutely, and they're all single-story, about 2,000 square feet.
They can't, people,
Yeah.
So
this is being televised and recorded.
What he said is they're roughly 2,000 square feet in floor area and 1-story structures.
Right. Mr. Zucker, please step to the microphone.
I want to make a comment before he speaks.
You do? Okay, Ken would like to make a comment.
To step on you.
You can stay right there.
I really want to point out, though, that, and I understand your question about the design, sir, but we're several steps away from that. We still have to look at zoning on this, and then a site plan, and then the building plan. So there's a whole lot that goes into this before we get to that type of thing, that your valid questions.
Yeah. Okay. Introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Jeffrey Zucker, and I live at 292 Jacob Lane in Manzanita Village. I actually wasn't planning on talking today, so I'm just going to kind of wing it. I'm the founder of Manzanita Village, which we started almost 25 years ago. When we were applying for the PAD for that property, we suggested clustered housing. We have about 12 acres. We have 36 homes, which you can see partially on the map, which is SF9 pad. We have 36 homes. But we have, on the 12 acres, we have about 8 acres of open space. So, I realize there's the economy involved, and I understand that the owner of the property has the right to develop it. I would like to see a much more sensitive approach to the land and the design of the overall layout of the property, so that there's more pedestrian relationship between the homes rather than the grid that has been proposed, a safer approach so that maybe there's, I'm not sure on that drawing, are those one-way streets?
No, they're two-way.
No, okay, so possibly a loop with a one access and exit onto Bradshaw Drive so that there's not 2 points. And much more usable open space. And for David, I would be happy to sit down with you and talk about the design.
Okay. Thank you. In back there, gentlemen, please step up.
Hi, my name is Dave Phillips. I live at 319 Buckingham Place, a little bit farther up the road. I'm not impacted by the view shed of this project at all. Thank you, sir. Very good job, Mr. Palmer.
Keep it up in the air. Keep it up in the air.
There you go. Okay, my background is about 30-some years of real estate development for public companies, particularly in small lot developments in Southern California. So I used to be on the other side of the table. This worst case should be one way. On the traffic, I don't know if anybody has figured out that if there's not a left turn pocket on this road, that as low as it is and in relationship to this corner, at a high rush hour peak with cars coming down, if people are coming up to return home, say at 5 o'clock, if you had 5, 6, 7 cars backed up to turn left, stopped right on that corner, I will guarantee you will have accidents on that corner. The other question I have would be, if you do a townhome development down here and have those roads, would the city be adding a requirement of an HOA to maintain the egress points? Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Got something new? Okay. We'll take about 3 more if we have them, and then we'll kind of summarize and move it till the next meeting. Okay.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to address you, your time and attention. My name is John Olson. I live at 302 Double D Drive. My house is right on the very lower right-hand corner of the plat you see there. You have a letter from me, and I think that stands. The new data today is confirmation that they intend to mass grade this area for the high-density development. It seems to me that the density of development goes hand in hand with how the developer treats the topography in the area. High-density development around this area is in much flatter area that doesn't require moving a whole lot of dirt around. But it seems to me that if you give high-density zoning to this area, they will necessarily have to move a lot of dirt. If you look around the area in all of South Prescott in the hilly area, we have dispersed housing. The dirt that is moved is to develop the foundation for the building, driveways, and generally the rest of the hillside is left natural. I would prefer to see that same kind of development here rather than completely just planing off the surface and having a flat area where it is now a hilly area. Keep it hilly. Necessarily, you have to go with lower density development, and that would be my suggestion. Proceed with development by all means, but do it consistent with the other housing in the area, not the housing that's down in the flats surrounding it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I believe we had Another one back over here.
My name's Ron Bathgate. I'm a resident of 431 Hillcrest Drive, and I'm also associated with Manzanita Village, so my wife and I spend a great deal of time in and around the village. One thing that we've noticed on Hillcrest Drive, which is deteriorating at a very rapid rate, in some places, if a car is parked on the road, it's one way only. There's been a tremendous increase in traffic on Hillcrest because people then go up Broadview and around that way. And our population on the street has changed. We now have 6 or 8 children on our street, and just like Bradshaw Drive, people tend to race up and down that hill for whatever the reasons are, fast enough that if they holler at them, it's too late and they're gone. And I can only imagine that the amount of traffic on our street will increase for people who want to avoid the curve on Bradshaw and avoid that light and come in the back way. The other point I wanted to mention is that on that curve on Bradshaw, coming up there as the sun is setting, you have the sun right in your eyes, which just is also a very dangerous situation. My suggestion would be that the developer, and I'm assuming this is going to go ahead, that whole corner be taken off, just cut. I know that means one of those townhouse buildings would have to be eliminated, but I think that would be a step in the right direction to cut that whole corner right off.
Mr. Chairman, 1 second. Is it Mr. Bathgate?
Yes.
You're talking about cutting that corner like that?
Yes.
Well, it probably goes out and around like that, though, to decrease the grade of the corner, as opposed to it'd be a lot steeper. But anyway, that's certainly in line with the whole Bradshaw issue there. A lot of things. Any other comments that are different? Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing now and extend this.
Go ahead and continue it to your next meeting. It's
Yeah.
the
Right.
31st of this month.
Okay, but what I want to do first, while we've got all this great participation here, is how many here from this project believe that Bradshaw Drive itself needs to have something done to it? Okay, and would that includes design and possible lanes or traffic? You want to see something done from an overall infrastructure and accessibility standpoint. So, okay. How many think that just traffic volume from these 40 units is going to impact everything around there? So everybody agrees on, boy, I guess we got good questions here, because everybody I might as well just say you agree to all this. So anyway, what about the density? You think that the number of units should be reduced and the lot size is bigger? Yeah. This is matching the letters. This is just like the letters, Yeah.
This part's not rocket science. We know
Downright
this.
amazing.
And then the whole thing, the discussion that, like David even got into from Granite Basin, was that maybe some type of recreational pedestrian facilities and more advantage of taking advantage of the open space that you do have in there to bring that as an amenity to the whole community. The whole area might be something too. Now, how many of you think that's a good idea? Yeah, quite a few. So with that, we'll move this to, do we say yes?
Can we confirm with the developer that is enough time for him to get this information together that's been asked for and get it to us in time to review?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we can either make it date certain or date uncertain. David, do you think it's going to be 3 weeks? It'll be the 31st. Plenty of time, okay. So do we have to do a vote on this to extend it?
Well, we didn't actually put it on for action
Yeah.
today. If you would
Okay.
just
Continue.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think in fairness to the public and to the applicant, I think we should do a little opinion poll up here. If I'd hate to see these guys go off and make some plans and make some modifications based on the zoning that they're asking for. I tend to feel that the zoning might be the inherent issue here. And I'd hate to see them spend a lot of time based on our SF6.
Right, but I
if
thought
feel that-
thought we already basically did that in terms of our first view, and that our comments pretty well matched, was in line with what the public is saying.
I agree with that. I just think we need to give them some indication as to what we might think is a better zoning for him to design it.
Yeah.
I agree with Ken, but in addition to just the number of units per acre, there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, excuse me for cat lovers here. And the density itself is just a number, and we have to look ahead to what rights would that give the developer to do a certain product that maybe isn't appropriate for the site. So at 6,000 square feet per unit, depending on the type of unit too, the product. If you had a different product in single family that wouldn't have such an impact on the site, that density may be appropriate if there weren't the surrounding problems with the infrastructure, specifically traffic and circulation. So I used to be a consultant too, and I've worked on projects of this size, and they would range anywhere from 5 or 6 units to 300 units for this much acreage. So it just depends on the surrounding area, the infrastructure, what's appropriate for the area. I mean, I can get 300 on this, but the 30-story structure that people wouldn't like. But maybe, $12 million homes might still pencil out for the developers. So we have to be aware that he's got a bottom line he has to deal with. And I understand that. And I want to caution everyone not to get caught up in the trees and not look at the whole forest. I personally don't need to see an architectural rendering of what the houses are going to be like. I know you don't have any idea now, and I've seen that only muddy the waters, and you spend a lot of time talking about, oh, I like the looks of that house, let's approve it, and that kind of stuff. So if there's any indication of the houses, all I need to see is a block showing the maximum allowed by that zoning in that area, and what area would be encompassed by that. So I'd hate to see him waste his time making some renderings. I'd rather see things that are really relevant to making a decision on what's the appropriate zoning for this site and what kind of product are we talking about. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so this will be the 31st of May, the next public hearing on this. So thank you very much for all you that have attended today, and we look forward to having you back again.
Mr. Chairman, just for the audience understanding, we generally have an agenda packet available for our commissioners a week before the meeting. At that time, it's also available to the public. So it'll get posted on the city's website, or if you want to come and look at it at City Hall, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks all. Yep. Wait, I was going to take a break at 11, but maybe since everybody's getting up, maybe we ought to do a 5-minute break now. But just enough time to get up and stretch your legs and get back in here, and we'll get right. We're going to go with the cell tower project next.
No problem. No problem. You're awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you. That was very well prepared. I appreciate that.
We'll do that. All right. Tell Jerry I said hello.
that's kind of where this is going now, is these bigger homes.
That was 30 years ago.
But he wouldn't have had to prohibit residential from doing that.
I don't know why they didn't. We don't know. All I'm saying is, we're not going to approve that. That's 6 years. Too dense. Way too dense. Give them, could have given them. That's all I was going for. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah.
I think it's totally inappropriate. No basis. Taken care of all occasions. City. No.
They widened Via Del Monte, the old days thinking it was the paper.
Well, the thing is, okay, it's if it's a 9 or 12 with, with 30 lots.
Here's the comment. Here's Manzanita.
You know Rossi Road?
12 acres, 36 units, 3 per acre, 5.5. The question is planning, that this is too dense.
Well, but when I drive through Manzanita, I don't really see all the open space. All I do is see all the cluster on 4 acres, and that to me is higher density. This is low density, right? But whatever it is, it's still high density compared to this, because this has got much bigger setbacks on the
If this was
site.
30 houses, they would have more. I would
Well,
be
that's
totally
true.
okay.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, I mean,
So that's why I say the density. How are the 6 that they asked for? Take shots and see that neighborhood.
sure I don't drive that way.
That's only, I'm only.
Well, I think Damon, I think so I think he's getting.
But is it 1 acre lots? Is it, we don't, he doesn't have to. But the
go past one. We've never gone past one.
Well, you know,
Well, that's our engineer in Manningway.
I didn't meet her.
Yes, yeah.
Or the smaller one? Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the engineer does it, but there is it's called Pedestrian Bicycle and Traffic Advisory Group. It just was formed this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And they work individual projects and policies related to general safety, which this sounds as if it overlaps with those very issues.
It's actually considered, for density purposes, the
Besides
same.
just the vehicular.
that shirt out of my
In the code.
Yeah, I did. And yours.
So that's something that really needs to be done, and I think next meeting, we'll want to have Ian Mattingly here.
Limitations placed upon its there were two options for these guys. They could bring back business general zoning and take the options off, or rezone it to a different zone.
Yeah, we're ready to reconvene here.
Okay, what's up next?
Trying to move it along, but yet be fair. Okay, we're going to move this back into the next item on the agenda, and we're going to do the cell tower on Willow Creek Road, and then we're going to go into Mr. Ascari's Whispering Rock annexation project. So the cell tower first, please.
So this was provided to you at your last meeting regarding a special use permit to allow the 80-foot tower that's proposed on the site. A number of questions came up as to the ability to disguise it or not disguise it, depending on circumstances. So most of the additional information that you have in your packet, beyond what you had last time, is specifically on whether or not this can be converted to what they call a stealth setting, which is a fake tree design over it. And the chairman's pointing it out. The location that's proposed is approximately right here. It's adjacent to a small shed that's there. It's 79 feet from the sidewalk on Willow Creek Road. The sidewalk, the outside edge of the sidewalk, is the outside edge of the property. So that line corresponds to the property line of the church. Setback distances are applicable for cell towers. They're typically based specifically on the height of the tower. So if it's an 80-foot tower, it should be 80 feet away from the street. There's sufficient room, and I believe in conversation with the representatives of Verizon, a minor modification, shifting it a foot one way or the other, will get it to the 80 feet, and that would be done with the submittal of the application for permit when they get to that stage, or if they get to that stage. The other issues relating to setback between the tower and the building, there's no requirement within our code for a setback there. So in fact, this tower could be closer to the church building as long as it gets further away from the property line. The proposal remains an 80-foot tower. It's a standard cell tower. 80-foot height is a little over what we typically see. We've generally been getting 70 or 75-foot towers through our processes. But at this particular point, the intent is to try to provide coverage over a larger area. And they provided you with an RF coverage map, which I believe they'll be able to talk to you about. It's part of your permit, or excuse me, your staff report. And they've also provided some additional renderings to show what the tower would look like as a stealth tree application. So with the tree coverage on it. There was some question between different members of the commission last time around about which that would be. So I do have the alternative renderings. I can show you two different directions on that, and then they will be able to talk to you about the RF coverage map that you have in your packet. I think one of the first things we were looking at, and this is very dark, I apologize, we aren't going to have a good view of it. Nope, that makes it even worse. Well, maybe not.
Is that Prescott?
It's not Prescott View, but it is Prescott. That tree location puts the 80 feet plus an additional 5 for the tree coverage, which would make the total height 85 feet at that location. So it's very...
Could you point out where the church is?
It's immediately adjacent to that tree. So it's just in this area, right behind it. And then from the roadway itself, from Willow Creek Road, it's much more prominent. And again, the church building itself is just behind it. So that's what a stealth application would look like. Your previous packet, and I believe in your packet this time, you have the photo renderings of what just the standard tower would be. Standard tower is often a better choice when you don't have a lot of tree coverage behind. In this particular case, however, this is the only direction where it would be very prominently sticking up above into the skyline. From the other directions, you have vegetated hillsides and developed properties behind it that may help disguise it from those directions. And I don't know about a partial stealth tree. So we do have representatives here who can answer questions you may have about the coverage. Again, I know several of you asked why an 80-foot tower as opposed to something shorter would be appropriate. I think they will be able to explain that to you. And of course, we can talk to you about process if you have any questions about how we handle special use permits specifically for cell towers.
Well, you know, one item was that with all cell towers, when we can, we would prefer to co-locate multiple carriers on it so that we reduce the overall number of towers that we have to have throughout the community. And, you know, obviously, if you lower the Verizon portion, they're going to have the best coverage on the top, but if you lower it for those other carriers, then that might be moot in terms of the ability to market or the other carriers' ability to use it. And so, you know, there's a little bit of a trade-off there. Right. But maybe perhaps if they don't have any other carriers in mind and that's good coverage through that area by those other carriers anyway, maybe it's not really a marketable thing anyway. But let's let the engineer for the representing Verizon come up and give us an overview on this.
Hi, good morning. Neil Tlasky with Pinnacle Consulting. So I want to thank you, Mr. Sheets, for pointing out that if this is a co-locatable facility, so as the top of the tower moves down, it is harder to kind of sell those lower tiers. It is co-locatable up to 3 total carriers, so it does kind of give a site for other providers to locate on. So to start this off, I'd actually kind of like to explain our objectives here. George, I'm not sure if you have the RF maps that I gave you. If you could please
tell us
show
what
it.
an RF map is?
So what this is a map created by an RF engineer that shows the current service and then the proposed service for this facility. So if you go to the current coverage.
Sir, could you tell us what an RF map is?
It's the radio frequency that is current. So this is the current coverage. This is the current radio frequency coverage in the area. So in the center of this map, you can see those small black triangles. That's a proposed site. Those triangles represent our proposed azimuths. So in this case, the green represents.
George, could you darken that a little bit, please?
Do you have a pointer?
I don't know.
I can stand here.
Yeah.
Are we talking about this one here?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So in this situation, the green represents in-building service. So, oh, cool. Thank you. So this is this facility. The green in general represents in-building service. So that is coverage strong enough that in a building you have 99% certainty of making and connecting a phone call, data uploads, downloads, what have you. Yellow is similar, representing in car. So as you're driving, same certainty, 99% calls, data upload, download. And red is walking. So no real obstructions around you. Walking, you can have 99% certainty of making those connections. So as you see, our site in the center doesn't have that certainty. That means people driving can't make calls, they're dropping calls. Emergency services aren't able to connect and send out data that they need to. Yeah. So then this is the proposed site with in service. So as you see, that entire stretch along Willow Creek Road has much better service. People can make calls, continue to drive with certainty that they will be able to talk and not drop calls or download, upload data, what have you. So that is our objective for this site. This is based on Verizon's service and Verizon's proposed tier on the facility at that 80 feet. So if you want to go to one of the simulations, please. Yes, please. How about the pine? So I did hear a few comments when we first put this up, but this is the pine that we are proposing. It does tend to blend a little more than the pole itself.
That's there?
Correct. We had originally proposed a pole because it was at another location. When we moved locations, we brought the pole with it. If a pine is preferred, that's fine with us. I would like to point out that the pole proposed, we show it in gray, but we can also do a brown to match the existing trees around there or the buildings as well. So I'm going to open up to any questions you guys might have.
Is it tree or no tree?
Well, that's.
So that's a proposed pole.
Yeah, I mean, we had a mixed opinion on the panel on that, and so, again, we're recommending body to the council, and so they have the, ability to discuss it, and based on other criteria more than just our land use and things, they might have other criteria they base it on, as well as, more of the what they think an impact is for the public and things. So we'll send them. If we approve the concept of the land use for the cell tower in general, then we'll kind of re-poll us again in terms of the height issue and, what do you think, tree better than a regular or whatever. We can send them that information as additional backup.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's typically part of your motion. So you would make a motion to approve the SUP at a certain height with or without the stealth application.
Well, yeah, and then what, put whatever the opposing view or the general consensus is and tell them the reasons why. But if you would have had it, let's say the reason was just a regular tower, then you may have voted yes, and so that, sends a little bit different message here if we're all 7 for it, but we're going to be against it because it's 10 feet too tall or something, then that's not necessarily.
So I would like to explain this photo a little bit more. This is not a straight up view. This is zoomed a little bit. So it does appear a little larger. That's just for clarity. It's zoomed to about 30%.
Okay, questions, Mel?
George, trying to recall, did you say there was a public notice sent out on this to the residents in the area, and was there any comments received on it?
We didn't receive any written comments. I'm not sure if anyone's in the audience for it, but we received no written comments.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, do we have any from the audience here that's opposed or anything? You have an opportunity to speak if there are, but I guess we don't have any in the audience, and we have gone through public notices, so.
You did have someone speak in favor of it at your last meeting, I believe.
Yeah, the coverage issue.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was my question.
That was
Mel
your question?
Stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mel.
I retract that question.
Yeah. George, it looks like you're pondering.
Could you put the proposed tower back up with it?
With the pine?
Yes.
He couldn't end with clothes on.
Yeah, so there's that.
It's quite a difference, thank you.
Yep. So to explain the pine a little more, we do use a company called Larson Design. They're based out of Tucson. In my opinion, they make a really high quality product. They do actually look like real trees once they're constructed. And then additionally, we use what's called radio frequency socks to stealth the antennas themselves. It makes it look a little more fuller.
Do they prune it periodically?
No, but they do maintain
Christmas
them.
lights.
Yeah. Any other questions? No?
Sir, have you considered other sites in this immediate area for a cell tower?
Yes, we have. It was, so as I said, the site has moved. It was originally proposed for Smoke Tree self-storage. I believe it's a little north of that, about a quarter mile. We couldn't reach an agreement with the landlord, and then this was the next most feasible site.
And why did you pick that site before you picked this one?
We tend to look to locate in more commercial zones for some obvious reasons. That was the commercial property that we found to be most suitable, and then with an interested landlord, because a lot of these things, might be the perfect parcel, but landlord might not want it or what have you. And then this was our next option.
Have you looked at any other sites in this particular area? And I appreciate what you're saying about the Smoke Tree mini storage. Further up the hill, further away from Willow Creek Road?
I'm going to let Michelle answer that one, because I'm stepping in halfway into this project.
So the way that essentially we go about choosing a site, Verizon will send us a search area. And typically that search area can be 600 feet or 1,000 feet. And so the reason that they choose an area, and they don't necessarily choose it, is they are getting complaints from customers. They are seeing a deficiency in coverage, dropped calls. Emergency services has reached out to them to say, we have a need in this area. So that's kind of what starts the process. They send us an area that they would like us to go in, and then we go into that area. We typically reach out to commercial areas first, and then if we don't get a response or interest, then we'll go to churches, and we kind of have a process that we go through.
I'm just asking if you looked further up the hill behind this tower.
You mean further east?
Or south, or whichever direction that is.
So we actually did analyze those. There are a lot of...
Excuse me. If you're coming south on Willow Creek Road, and you come to the church, behind the church is a hill.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
So those are much smaller residential parcels, almost impossible to meet setbacks, stuff like that. And then zoning on the residential parcel would be much stricter.
We would like to be as, well, I don't even, can you go on a residential here?
You can, but the SOP process. But the further in, sorry, excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Just to point out, the further into a residential district you get, the more impact it has on those residential properties. So generally, there's a great deal more opposition to towers in a denser residential area than if you can get away from that to either larger commercial areas or in this case, a church site, which is a very large parcel.
Thank you.
Do you have the site plan that shows where this would go next to that shed? You know, the question there is the large parcel with it includes the church and some open space.
That, or do you want the aerial photo?
The
that
other one
shows-
that's a topographical one. And
Maybe.
So the parcel does extend much further south. Yeah.
so as I understand, this is posted for sale, that you would do a split and sell that off. And so if we put a tower here, then how in the future are we going to ensure that the fall distance from here is going to not interfere with any structures over that might be here, which could be residential, as I understand it, could be residential structures.
So typically, with any kind of land split, there's a process involved. There's a review on the city side. At this point, no one submitted anything to us to do that. If they do, part of the review is to determine where the appropriate location of that line is, and we look at setbacks as part of it. You can't split a lot and create a nonconformance that doesn't already exist. So if they were to put an 80-foot tower in, and then later come back to us and want to split the lot, they're going to have to adjust that lot line to give the 80-foot fall distance within that parcel that contains the church and the tower.
Right, so
it's
you
gonna-
mean,
it'll
you
be-
suggested the church would keep this portion here for a distance rather than have an easement or something that this new owner would be involved in?
That's
Or you could
correct.
do it either way, I guess.
Setbacks are generally not easements. Setbacks have to be obtained through the location of the property lines. They would have to shift the property line far enough to meet the 80-foot fall distance.
And we did have the landlord here last meeting, and if my memory serves, he said that meeting setbacks, if that split were to happen, would be no issue.
Okay. Okay, any other commissioner questions?
I have a question. George, I know zoning is not applicable to this situation, but is that whole parcel single-family residential with a special use permit for the church?
Yes, most likely it has a special use permit. We have a lot of older churches that were grandfathered in when the new zoning code went into effect in 2003. If it predated that, it may or may not have had an SUP, but churches are permitted uses through that type of a process. It's actually considered a conditional use permit.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Okay, now, you remember the tree, the stealth version would be 5 foot taller, you know,
Correct.
because of hiding the antennas down, they have to be down a ways. They're not going to sit up on top of the tree.
Right, so top of steel on that would be
Right.
80 feet, and then the branches, just to have a
Yeah.
more realistic appearance, the branches would be above.
Yeah, so that'd be an 85, so we would require a little bit more setback from the sidewalk.
Correct.
If, you know, if a stealth
Yeah.
would go with that, and so that could be part of the motion, that we match whatever the appropriate setback is, you know, once, if the council would choose the stealth versus the regular tower. And we also talked about the fact if you have other carriers, you might have a diesel generator or something. Not the other carriers, or?
No, none of the carriers in that area would require a generator.
Okay, because, you know, we had mentioned, rather than a wire, the chain link fence with slats in it, which helps block sightline, but the sound and the appearance would be better if you would do a concrete block, stuccoed paint to match the church, so it's less intrusive on the church. And I believe you acknowledged that that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, we could do CMU if that was, if you guys wish that. There would be no smoke or scent noise or anything from this facility.
Yeah. You know, I don't know what the commissioner's view of that is. We have required that in some places, but a lot of times that was in an HOA that would have strict architectural rules as well as the diesel noise issue, but that wouldn't be a problem, I guess. You know, You guys, Ken?
I'm a no on this project because of the height. I think going 2.5 times the zoning height in that area is fairly excessive. I don't know how many more people you'll serve with this particular tower and how many, I mean, you're going to have 3 co-users, and I appreciate the need for that. I looked at your map and I don't see it's a big tower for what turns out to be a fairly small area that you're filling, in my opinion. I'm not an engineer on this project, but I circled the area that it was now green that was not green. It's hard to see because it was such a zoomed in or zoomed out map. But I think if we were to say honk if you want an 85-foot tower as you're going down Willow Creek Road, you'd probably get more objections than you do from the few neighbors that might have seen this tower. So there's 40,000 cars a day on Willow Creek Road, and I find it objectionable to have it that high, stealth or not. Our packet did not show a stealth tree in it, which probably helped cement some of my views because we asked you if you could have had that for this meeting.
We did send them earlier. They should have been in there.
They provided some additional renderings, that's what.
Yeah, we did send a second set, so there should have been one rendering on there. We did send a second set a few days ago.
Oh, not in this packet that I got Friday?
Yeah, you
Is it there? Well, then it's there. God love you. That's great.
But
I'm still against it. I think it's too tall for the area, 2.5 times the zoning height. It's too close to Willow Creek Road. The views that I'm mainly concerned with are we only have 3 north-south arteries. Thank you, Ted. We only have 3 north-south arteries in our community, and Willow Creek Road is probably the primary north-south one that the community takes all the time. So I understand that you have a void in some of the service areas, but I'm a no on this one just because of the height and the proximity to Willow Creek Road. I think there are some other sites that wouldn't be viewed by 40,000 people a day going up and down Willow Creek Road.
Yeah. Okay, let's get a feeling from the commissioners on where each member stands on this. We want to make sure that we have the right motion and have a good sense of feeling before we either move this forward with a recommendation or not. Jared, what do you think?
I'm in favor of moving forward with recommending it.
Mel?
I'm not, for the same reasons that were just stated as far as the height and the location.
Okay. Ted?
I'm in favor, depending on what the motion is, but as I kind of generally understand the motion, I'm in favor.
Yeah, okay. George?
I'm in favor of it.
Terry?
I'm in favor of it. I disagree with Mr. Maverick because I don't think it's really up to the people driving up and down the street as much as it is the neighbors in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I'm for it.
Okay, with all that said, who's willing to make a modified motion that talks about the setback and also possibly the screening building being a block and a paint to match the church?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Whether you want a pine tree or a monopole.
Yes, pine tree or monopole. And then we'll have those that voted no clarify their objections, which will be forwarded to the city council for their understanding.
It is my humble suggestion that you make the motion because you're most conversant with all the items that need to be in that motion.
Well, that is a first. That is, gosh darn. Yeah, well, thank you, Ted. I didn't know, I didn't even take you out to lunch yet.
We want you to take the
Yeah,
fall.
okay. I move that we approve special use permit for the installation of the cell tower. It's SUP 18-002, and the motion would include a 85-foot tall stealth pine tree with appropriate setback of 85 feet from the sidewalk on Willow Creek Road, and also a block stucco compound that would be stuccoed and painted to match the church. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of moving this forward, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Okay, all opposed?
No.
Okay, Mel, why don't you go with the first reasons why you are voting no?
Well, it's the height and location, basically.
Height and location? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's the over 50 feet above the underlying zoning, which becomes height, but it's the magnitude of how far it's exceeding the existing zoning height that's really bothering me, and the proximity to Willow Creek Road, which does get a lot of traffic. And while they're not probably as focused as the residents are, Mr. Marshall, I appreciate what you were saying in reference to the neighbors. I think it's the impact to the community is much bigger.
Yeah, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
One option when we have a situation like this where there are, where you're not unanimous, we can take written correspondence from those members who opposed, explaining why they were opposed, and include that information in the agenda packet when it goes to council. So you're welcome to put it in writing to make it clear.
You can, but it sounds like it's simple, like A, B, C, and so Darla can probably do that in the staff report going to council. And
if someone wants to present us more information, we'll welcome anything in writing.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I will send a short memo summarizing my thoughts in reference to that so that the council can see that.
Very good.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, and we like cell tower services. Okay, we're going to do Whispering Rock now, which is north of the zoo along Willow Creek Road, and there's 4 parts to this. There's an annexation, there's a general plan, map amendment, there is a rezoning, and there is also a preliminary plat. And I believe we can approve none, any, or all of these items. We can do that today, or we can again continue it for the summer, all of this for next meeting.
You're correct, sir.
Yeah.
So the annexation request includes a relatively large piece of property that could be developed as a commercial subdivision. They've provided, along with that, a request to rezone the property. County right now has it zoned as a residential category, to rezone the property to a commercial category, which more matches the uses that would typically occur along a major roadway like Willow Creek Road. As part of that, the rezoning affects the general plan map somewhat. There's sort of an anomalous bulge in the general plan map that needs to be straightened out to allow for the uses to match up with the zoning. And then they've submitted a subdivision plat. We received a modification of that subdivision plat that we've handed out to you this morning. It came in yesterday. We've given you a smaller size copy. We have a larger size copy, and I believe we have the representatives of Dr. Ascari's annexation here who can make a presentation about this new layout. It is somewhat different than the one that we included in the packet, the one that we had previously looked at. It mostly involves relatively minor relocation of streets, but a reduction in the number of lots and the change in the size of those lots. To make it probably flow a little bit smoother if we let them make their presentation, and then I'm available to answer any questions about the process, and they should be able to answer any questions about the changes. It is set on your agenda for action if you choose to do that, but again, new information, if you want to take more time, it's within your purview to do so.
Okay, Michael, welcome again.
Thanks again. And again, I am Michael Haywood, Nexus Southwest, offices at 212 South Marina. And most assuredly, this is a different product than the drafting that you see in your packet. I was at a point yesterday of considering that, physician heal thyself might be important because I wanted to shoot Dr. Ascari. So nonetheless, we spent some time going over this yesterday afternoon, and I see a lot of the reasoning. Mr. Maverick, you've been involved in the development business for years and years. You know that build it and they will come. It might work in movies and with baseball fields. The good doctor and his associates have made a lot of headway, even in the week interim since last we met. The parcel configuration obviously has changed. We got rid of all of the smaller lots because now we have some actual letters of intent and commitment for some of those properties. The A and E that are medical facilities, and F for the assisted living. We have some folks that are willing to step up to the plate right now and start that process. The old residential, the old Wilkinson Rifle Ranch residence in the northeast corner has been slated as a potential boutique hotel. And a boutique hotel, from what I'm gathering, I mean, I'm a Motel 6 kind of guy, but a boutique hotel would be of a Phoenician caliber, of something, something a higher end resort kind of, very tranquil, very secluded, very utilizing, incorporating into the rocks, and minimal impact to anything other than developments in the structure. The larger facility is proposed on J, which would be a public hotel that would afford people access, moms and dads visiting their Embry-Riddle students, people visiting their, and I can say old guy because by God I am one, but people visiting at the senior campus, if you will, that there's that opportunity. The residence that was Mr. Chadwick's once upon a time, the good doctor has made the commitment to set it aside as a chapel of hope, a place where people can go and ponder the reality of life on the planet and the short time span that sometime affords. So all in all, the only thing that was arguable, and on the plan that you have in your packet, you see the roundabout and the way the roadway goes into the rocks in your roundabout. I had conversation with Mr. Worley about that it made sense because we thought it would be the ideal location to set up a little shop to sell City of Prescott t-shirts that said, "I hiked Whispering Rock." Or whatever, occasional taco stand might be. Nonetheless, that's out the door. They just didn't think that was a good idea. So we do see, at least setting aside, we have exceeded the amount of open space that's required. We've set aside all of those, the rocky areas, all of that pattern. What we do propose in our Site M, that albeit Site M is fairly substantial, flashlight ain't gonna work. I think I left the pointer somewhere. There we go. Yeah, that within this area, all of this is quite developable, quite nice properties. Some of this in this area, again, there's some areas that are inaccessible, but there are areas that are certainly developable and usable. What we would propose, since all of that will ultimately connect with the Dells Trails systems and things like that, is again to work hand in hand with the Trails folks. We've been meeting with them for months so far, looking at the opportunity for parking areas at the end of that little stub road, creating easements for public trail access through any of the private properties, creating easements in all of the area of the open space that would accommodate anyone's utilization of that area. It is pretty substantial, pretty amazing rock formations back in there if you get in and hike around. And then the balance of the areas are, as we have indicated on all along, more commercial retail uses next to Willow Creek Road, restaurant, sports bar, that type of facility, those types of facilities that would lend themselves to that use along that corridor. We still maintain the frontage buffer zone that would be improved with landscaping to create that little better visual impact. We don't propose any 85-foot tall pine trees. So on that corridor, maybe a couple of 30s or 40s, no, anyhow. So no, so what you see here, albeit, you know, that when I initially thought, my God, you want me to come over here? I've seen this for a matter of hours, and you want me to walk in here and put myself in harm's way? And I spent a little time, like I say, we spent some time yesterday afternoon looking at it. I got my ego out of the equation and thought, my God, this really does make sense and really is a viable approach to this development of this property. So again, we're here today with, you know, asking for the moon, for the annexation, for the rezoning, for the master plan, for the approval, at least in concept, of this preliminary plat. You know, obviously, I mean, we have already done all of the preliminary engineering. We've done all of the water studies. We've done all of the drainage studies. We've done all of the sewerage studies. We've done all of the traffic impact studies. And if anything, all of those studies anticipated higher density than what we're winding up here. So we know that what we had proposed in the first place, that was indeed higher density, fit all the criteria of the technical ease. You know, this we have 100% available to develop what we had. You know, essentially now we have 150% available to develop what we have. So the technical ease is in order, you know, within your purview to modify, to edit, to request additional items, et cetera, on any of this stuff. But, you know, most assuredly, I'm just very, very comfortable at this point that the anticipated uses are accurate, that the preliminary plat could use a little tuning, but that what you see is what we propose to move forward with. Here to answer any questions, slings, any arrows, et cetera.
Yeah, have we received letters of support or opposition?
Not directly for this, no, sir.
Yeah, okay.
There are 3 property owners involved in the annexation and rezoning. The primary property, of course, is Dr. Iscari's, the largest piece. This piece is, I believe, under contract or will be under contract. It's Chadwick Wire. We've listed those in your staff report. And then there's a small sliver of property that's actually at the back of this church up here that's in the county but belongs to the church. It's a separate parcel and it needs to be included in the annexation. It has been in the legal descriptions, the ads, and what's in your staff report. All of those property owners are in support of it. No opposition from any adjacent property owners that we're aware of.
Question?
Okay, thank you. We'll go left this time with George.
George, the two properties that you just mentioned, 2.2 and 1.3, I think it is. What is proposed for those?
They're actually being incorporated into the project. Part of the Chadwick Wire property is here.
Yes.
So that becomes part of this lot and potentially could be developed, portions of it. I think Mr. Haywood pointed out that this was intended to be preserved. The house itself and the immediate surroundings would be preserved for a particular use associated with the project. The church property is actually a little piece back here, but a trade option is being negotiated to allow for the main road in and out of the project to align at a 90-degree four-way intersection with Haas Drive across Willow Creek Road. The Haas Drive is the northernmost entrance and exit from Embry-Riddle University. So in regard to that, that portion of the church property would go to the doctor and his subdivision plat, and a portion of what would have been the Chadwick Wire property would go to the church to compensate for that land swap. The church itself is not part of this development, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would be done to create a 90-degree intersection. So
four-way signalized intersections are preferable to any kind of offsets.
So I understand that. So the road would drop down from what it's shown here.
This actually indicates it the way it would be. So the original subdivision plat you saw didn't include that. Too many laser pointers, right? So the new alignment would actually allow for that 90-degree four-way intersection to occur. The original proposal would have had the intersection offset from Haas Drive. It would have been a little north of Haas Drive.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lee, some of our initial conversation with Embry-Riddle was to relocate. Our driveway was going to come in at this location. We were going to assist them in rebuilding Haas Drive to come through the solar panel area. And the ultimate, outcome, the good doctor went to the church. The church property line right now is somewhere, about up here.
Right there.
Somewhere here and straight down. And then as George indicated, another just anomaly of deeding in Yavapai County. There's a skinny little strip here that they own that's still Yavapai County. What we are doing with the church is essentially an exchange that to take the properties that we're utilizing up here for our roadway, we're giving them twice as much area and will assist them in relocating their parking and everything. So for every square foot of their property that we're taking to create this, I need new batteries. For every square foot we're taking, in more ways than one, but in every square foot we're taking, we're giving them back 2 square feet. And it does create, we had looked at a roundabout, a signalized intersection will, the ITE stuff is showing that a signalized intersection at Haas makes the most sense, which controls access into Embry-Riddle, again, breaks down the potential for excessive speed along that portion of Willow Creek Road and provides 4-way access, a safer 4-way access for everyone. We'll still maintain our ITE, presently shows right in, right out at the northern point of penetration onto the Willow Creek corridor.
Okay, Terry?
My question, George, is Mr. Haywood spoke earlier of arrows. Where does the archery range get its access?
I believe it was through the church property, just to the south.
Yeah, somewhere down in
Is it just south of?
It's just off of this.
Just
this
south
site.
of the church, yes.
I admit to having never been there. I apologize.
Dueling red dots.
These are pointers.
So it's not really affected by this development?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm Dave Dornbush. I'm on the board of trustees
Oh,
of the church.
Okay, would you,
Sometimes I can project. Dave Dornbush. I'm on the board of trustees for Center for Spiritual Living. And they do access right, it's the same entry. You come into the entry, you go a little bit to the left to the church or a little bit to the right to the range. My understanding is that this is going to take out our parking lot. So I guess I would expect that we would get a new parking lot. But our president is kind of dealing with that. Wouldn't you think?
That would
You may
be
think,
a
but I
reasonable
wouldn't expect.
explanation.
Well, yeah.
not my problem.
As we mentioned last time when we did the initial presentation of this to you, there is a benefit to the church for that land exchange in that they would then have access out via the 4-way signalized intersection instead of the current difficult situation trying to
Yeah, it's not easy getting in and out, well, mostly getting out, and especially doing a left turn. And same thing goes with that Embry-Riddle Haas Drive, even trying to turn left into it if you're going north with all the traffic coming down Willow Creek Road. Now, you need a protected arrow in order to get in and out safely, and that's probably been overdue for a while with all that traffic coming in. So, okay, over on this side, commissioners?
I think we covered this, but optically, that doesn't look like 90 degrees to me. Excuse me for turning my back to you. And I'm kind of wondering, instead of curving down like this, why don't you curve up a little bit and take less of the church's parking lot?
In answer to that question, it is indeed a 90-degree angle at the right-of-way. That the other mapping that shows the alignment of the right-of-way, that we are perpendicular, that there's a circular curve that comes into this location that goes into a tangent that's perpendicular to the roadway. Any other configuration is never going to afford us the 90-degree going into Embry-Riddle. That Embry-Riddle, they're in that circuitous kind of a circle, but everybody, all the circles, all the radii come back to where they would be perpendicular to the right-of-way. So it is indeed a perfect 90-degree intersection. this goofy thing. But anyhow, having two of those come together at that location, there was no real way to do any creative swinging farther north because we knew we were going to compromise their parking lot, and it is part of our intention to assist in the redevelopment of their area and provide them with adequate access and adequate parking.
Thank you.
I have a comment again. So the site plan that we have in our packet shows a different alignment to that intersection than what's on the aerial.
No, the the configuration of the roadways and all that stuff in this area are the same. The only thing that's modified is some of the stuff on the interior. The frame around the painting is still the same, and the access and the circular curve data. My data in here is a little bit different, but George, do you have a copy of the quotes preliminary plat? That one, even just the stick work. No,
Oh, that's the previous one.
that's the ancient.
Too many copies.
You and me both.
I do not have a small size. Not that size.
Is there one in your packet?
I have a copy there.
We have one.
Let it go.
Should be the old one right there.
Okay. Well, this is, yeah, this is a pretty decent reference. There is the one that the silly surveyor came up with that actually has all of the curve data, deltas to the closest second of arc, et cetera, that guarantees, but that's irrelevant. Essentially, it is the same deal. We've done a little modification. This is the drawing that you're looking at over here on the board has lowered the bubble, that northerly bubble. We drug the road a little farther to the south in the middle. We've moved the hammerhead a little, or the roundabout a little farther to the south. But for the most part, you know, the access at the roadway is nonetheless preserved. This was the only reasonable spot to create the 90-degree access and the signalized intersection. So yeah, there you go. The only thing that shifted between what you have and what we have is the location of this roadway and some of the configuration of the properties and a reduction of the overall number of proposed lots.
Okay, commissioners on this side?
Thank you, Michael. It's been it's a great little project. I've seen this parcel for years, sitting there. And my question to you firstly is, my statement is, it's pretty tough on us to get a new site plan day of meeting, and really, as you know very well.
Yeah.
It's just tough on the commissioners to have to study their packet and then have a change come in at the last minute. Although it sounds like your changes are somewhat minor. My question on the change is how much of that open space has changed?
The actual volume of open space hasn't changed at all. We had a little over 25%, 25.2 or something like that initially. This may be 25.1. So,
and where is it that the boundaries of that open space changed from this site plan, which has it somewhat squared off, and
yeah,
this one that you have gentle curves?
the somewhat squared off was a more waffle iron approach to thing without sensitivity to what really is encompassed. So this, the artsy curvy alignment does in fact go around the major rock outcroppings. That these portions of the property are certainly developable as good-sized lots. They're all 22,000 square foot lots that would be potentially homes for some of the resident doctors at the medical facilities. And then everything else that's rock pile has been set aside as open space. We did not set this area aside, but again, as I've indicated, we are more than willing to work with the City of Prescott Parks and Recs people to create easements. You bet.
Into this area right here.
You bet. To create easements, to create access, to create any connectivity to adjoining trail systems. We'd be happy to work with the powers in that area.
And are you anticipating any parking for the trail users?
Potentially, yeah, again, and that's part of the reason of this little stub down here, that when I had met with one of the trails guys, 8-9 months ago, pushing that at least, that we went over this mapping and they had asked to see if there was an opportunity maybe to create, similar to like you have over on West Ridge at the Downer Trail area, like you have at Peavine, an area where folks could, where you can park your environmentally sensitive vehicle or your bicycle. I'm being a
Would
fool.
you be able to put that provision in your site plan? In other words,
Yeah.
would you commit to that?
Sure. I don't think there's a problem of committing to it. I think that if you put it in to say that by the time that we got to, how could this be? How would we word that, George? That we would commit, but would commit down the road.
It's probably something that would be a commitment in the development agreement that's being worked out for this project. There would be a commitment to provide parking to be determined later in cooperation between the
Is that
city
something
staff
that
and
we
them.
might make in a motion that provisions be made in a development agreement?
I believe we're already seeking that in the development agreement.
So it
But
wouldn't
if you
be-
wanted
it
to
wouldn't be-
reinforce that, yes, you could certainly say with a provision for trail connectivity and parking associated.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, normally a development agreement is more of a contractual thing, and it isn't a real estate disclosure or those property buyers buying these particular sections. And I'd rather see just a couple of sentences on a preliminary plat that just stated that the intent to provide parking and connectivity as worked through the city staff, and it wouldn't have to be indicated on the map of the plat or an easement on there, but just that sentence, because that's normally that is the document which goes to a possible buyer, potential buyer.
Are you
a plat
okay with that type
Exactly.
of thing? I think
Yeah,
that's
we
great.
need to maintain flexibility as well as the city needs to maintain flexibility to see where do they want this parking area, where do they want to have
They're
their
a city,
trail
they don't
system
have
come
to be
through.
flexible.
Well, that's true. That is an indication, but
We know that. Thank you, George. I think that was a good addition. I want to caution all of us, and myself included, because I get caught up with some of the uses that we're talking about here. Any use under BG, business general zoning, would be acceptable here. Is that correct, George?
That's correct. There's no specific limitation on uses proposed.
While sometimes we get excited when we hear of things like hotels and restaurants and all these buzzwords that I've used all those words too. The market tells us if our words are going to be fruitful or not. So I think we have to realize that this is business general zoning, and whatever in business general is going to be able to happen here. So I like the project. I think it's a good one. I think my fellow commissioners have talked about the access quite a bit, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. I like from what I've been able to see so far and study with your new eliminating one of the roundabouts. I think you have a nice project. I like the fact you got rid of some of the clutter of the smaller lots. You'll still be able to get smaller lots, whether they're PADs or come back for lot splits. But I generally like the plan, and I want to make sure that when our recommendation goes to council, I don't have any problem with the annexation. I don't have a problem with the zoning changes. My questions would be how we tie things to the site plan so that we have what the future is looking for in our community. Other than
Mr.
that,
Chairman,
it's
I
great.
think I can address that. The development agreement is out to Dr. Ascari for review, but the development agreement is what ties the particular proposed uses to water. So there are performance criteria in the current draft of the types of uses and the timing within which those uses get developed.
Are you talking types of uses like a hotel?
Yes.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, so
Not just whatever's-
primarily medical facility is really what we're sort of, the community benefit, I think, of this is, when you look at the development agreement, it's really two things. It's the additional medical facilities and assisted living, and then the sales tax generation from the commercial uses. Obviously, under a business general zone, we wouldn't want housing, single-family housing development to go in over this property. The community benefit is somewhat diminished. So in the development agreement, what's currently drafted is that the delivery of the water, the agreement to provide the water service to this property is tied to performance, tied to the site plan, which is specific types of uses in in relatively specific locations on the property, and then a time within which they need to be developed. So we don't want to tie up water for years and years and years. So the performance measurements are going to be, you're going to build these uses, you're going to build them within a certain time, and we're going to give you the water, and the failure to meet those performance criteria, the recourse of the city is we have the right to basically withdraw the water, some or all of the water we're going to provide. So that's the leverage, I guess. So it is.
We just had water walk in.
There's
Leslie.
So that's kind of where this is. That's where the water. So that's the leverage that we have. If ultimately the council decides to do the this is a pre-annexation development agreement, so it's all sort of at the final approval process. Council decides to approve. We have a pre-annexation agreement, an annexation vote, a rezoning vote, a subdivision, preliminary plat approval, a water service agreement. The types of uses and the time within which they're built are the delivery of the water or the agreement to provide water is predicated on those two performance criteria.
So what happens, this is all fairly new to the commission, the water issues and tying them to development agreements. We hardly ever had that in the past. So this is fairly new turf, I think, for most of us.
No turf out there. This is all natural.
And I understand what's out there. But what happens when and if that great plan doesn't happen? Does the use have to come back to us? Who makes the decision that if they don't get the hotel and you take the water away, what happens then?
I think it depends on what the change triggers. If the change triggers something in the development agreement, if in other words, let's say, there's no proposal to change the assisted living or the medical, I think those are the most important to focus on, because that's, again, the sort of broader, I think, community benefit are the medical facilities and the assisted living. The hotel and the restaurants, retail, that's sort of a sales tax base, again, a community benefit. But so if let's say if the medical facility doesn't happen, then the development agreement provides that the city, meaning the city council, would have the ability to withdraw some or all of the water. Obviously, if something's built and we're delivering water to it, we can't cut the pipe. But because we don't want to tie up, water on a project that's not going to happen. So it's not an automatic withdrawal of the water, it's a process, and that would generally go to the city council for a decision, because there may be extenuating circumstances like a, recession or something like that. So that becomes a kind of policy business decision of the council. However, if, for instance, it's a subdivision plat amendment that goes through the platting, the amendment process. So that would come back to you. But if it's strictly sort of a use, kind of site plan use, timing issue, that primarily is going to be the city council. Doesn't mean that it can't come back here for your recommendation, if that's what the direction we get. But ultimately, the final decision is made at the council level.
Thank you. And again, I asked that question because this is fairly new for us. We're not used to this process at all. Marlon, you're sitting here. Do you ever recall anything like this before in your 6 years?
Should have had.
I couldn't agree with you more. I really do. Thank you. That was the whole point of it. I just want us to know that just because that use doesn't happen in whatever timing is in that development doesn't mean it's going to come back here. If the use is obviously gone, if someone else builds a hotel or a restaurant in the area and the market won't support it, then you'll know what's going to happen. And I assume then some changes might come back here.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now, I believe I already did a call to public, did I not? And we didn't have any additional input?
You're certainly welcome to make sure.
Okay, so let's get a reading. You know, Ken sounds like he's ready to move this forward.
Yes.
Are you, Hal? Yep. You okay with this, Ted? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
George? Okay. Terry? Okay. Okay, so with all that said, I'll entertain, there's 4 separate motions. There's, the annexation would be the first one.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion for the annexation, to recommend annexation of ANX 17-00003 with initial zoning to be single-family 35 or SF 35.
Okay. Second, please.
I second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Raise your right hand. Opposition passes 7-0. Okay, next one is the general plan map minor amendment. Who wants to do that?
I'll motion. I move to recommend minor general plan amendment GNP 18-00002, changing the designation of the parcels to commercial employment.
I have a question. Never mind, I retracted it. I'm on the wrong item.
Okay, second it then again.
I second it.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
okay, aye. Okay, then the next one is the rezone motion. Yeah.
I'll move that.
Okay, that's PLN 17-0003.
Want me to read that?
Yes, okay.
Move to recommend approval of rezoning PLN 17-00003 from single family SF 35 to business general BG.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the last motion on this is the preliminary plat. You gonna, okay,
Move to recommend approval of the preliminary plat, PLN 18-00005.
okay.
Does that necessarily signify this preliminary plat?
It will need to be redrawn into a typical plat format that can be submitted to us prior to us taking it to council.
And is that something that should come here first, or no?
No, sir. What they will do is take this line drawing, put it on the format for a plat as a black line, and then it will look like the plat that you had in your packet previously.
Great, thank you. I just wanted the public to hear that. Thank you.
Got a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes 7-0. The next item is the annexation of what's called the Liberator Project. And I see Jason and Kevin are back there. What's taking so long to get this to us today? You know? I guess we've had too many items on the agenda, so thanks for coming. Okay, Katie, I guess you're up.
All right.
Bye, Marlon.
Katie Peterson, Community Development Department. Again, this is the proposed annexation with initial city zoning and then the rezone.
So they're two separate actions, but I'll be presenting them and we can discuss them together. This is a joint city-private application, joint application. The sites are adjacent, one owned by Third Gen Enterprises. That's the lot to the west. The lot to the east, northeast is the city of Prescott owned lot. So the proposal is for use of the Third Gen Enterprises site and a portion of the southwestern portion, the western portion of the city-owned site. So this is not a plat. It's specifically a plat of annexation, just laying out the annexation portion. And the site is located in the northeastern portion of this, just outside the northeastern portion of the city. As you can see, the pink area is the area that's currently designated in our general plan for industrial land use. That's the western portion of the site. The eastern portion and northeast portion is recreation, open space, general plan land use. And the proposed project for the industrial use is for the majority of the spaces on the currently designated industrial portion. They're proposing to use the western portion of the city-owned site as industrial use. So the action here today is about assigning zoning under the city zoning that would be equivalent to the current county zoning. So currently the county has this zoned residential rural. The equivalent city zoning would be rural estate 2 acre. So that would be the initial rezone if annexed into the city. The surrounding zoning to the west, industrial light, and to the north there above the proposed site is industrial transitional and industrial general zones. So the area that's shown on this map that's sort of orange is the proposed site. You can see the lot line there in gray. I don't think, let me see if I have a pointer that works. So here's the lot line currently. So this is the city, or sorry, this is the Third Gen Enterprises site, owned site, and this is the city portion. They're proposing using this portion to the west of the creek bed. And so the orange portion is the portion that's currently county designated residential rural, and then the equivalent city zone would be, the initial rezoning would be rural estate 2 acre. So the proposed rezone is for zone change or rezone from rural estate 2 acre. Then the second action would be this rezone to industrial general for their proposed use for a contractor's yard. Going through the consistency with the 2015 Prescott general plan, this industrial general zone is consistent with the general plan. The western portion designated industrial is the portion that would be used entirely for the proposed contractor storage yard. That southeast east portion designated recreation open space, it would be the western corner of that lot, which would be used for the contractor's yard. The remainder of the lot located in the creek bed would remain undeveloped. And that's a general overview of what they're proposing. So it's 2 different actions: the annexation with initial city zone, and then a rezone to this industrial use to allow their proposed use.
Okay. Could we have Jason come up and give us an overview? You know, like, is your office going to be bigger than Mike's? You know, something like that. And then you're moving your headquarters. You know, give us a feel for what's going on here. And you're moving the batch plant too. Is that right? Or yeah.
Yeah, I can give you a brief overview, Chairman, Vice Chairman, Commissioners. It's almost lunchtime too, so we'll make this quick.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
The general use of
Where are we going?
Good question. The general use of the third-gen commercial piece is going to be expanded into a little bit larger, 2 and 3 acre parcels. That'll be for industry partners and future sales. Don't know what those exact needs are at this date, depending on those end users. And then really the east half of that private parcel is going to be the anchor site for Fan Contracting's new office location, which will require office, yard space, and relocation of our batching facilities. So it's a perfect site if you really look at its location in relation to the city's sewer facility there, the Hanson operations that are there at the industrial park. It really doesn't get any better in terms of a site acquisition perspective for our use. But the expansion area in itself, we've been talking to some industry partners that are definitely looking for more space, and that is mostly yard space. So that's what we're looking at for the expansion area.
Hi, Jason. Thank you. Can you, Katie, could you put this exhibit up?
Was it this one?
The one with the red lines around both parcels, both property owners' properties.
The one that looks like a flag. There you go.
This one?
That's
the general
good enough.
plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually have 2 questions. Katie, I want to, if you wouldn't mind telling all of us what the difference is between IL, IT, and IG.
Well, for their proposed use, the contractor's yard, that use is allowed, not in the IT zone. It would be allowed in either the IL or IG zone.
What is IL?
Industrial light. So it's more like assembly, lighter industrial, less intensive uses. IG is general. So it's the most lenient of the industrial zones in terms of uses. This use would be allowed in either the industrial light or IG.
Clarify what the zoning is for the public. Jason, my question to you is, you talk about the east half, it's not going to be built. Can you show us with all those blue lines, which you're referring to, that you would not build east of? Is that your question, Terry? I'm sorry.
Certainly. So if you look at, Liberator comes in here off of Corsair and Centerforce comes in here, the goal is to build a horseshoe road and a small road that goes to the north there, that this is all becomes that commercial expansion area for future. From about this point right here, which is at the end of Liberator, this is the starting point of the anchor site for Fan Contracting's use, and the building and the shop maintenance facility will sit there, and then everything behind it and around it is that open space that will get utilized for stockpiling, storage, and our plant uses. This, where you're seeing this line, is actually a drop off into the wash. So that is the area. They came out with new floodplain maps that actually where this property boundary is. And Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong here, that's where that resides. And so, the goal, if we can recapture some of this and use it for more storage, that's our end goal. It's, our use is, for what we need is more real estate for stockpiling, laydown, and storage than it is anything else. So that's our goal.
You would be using some of the property east of those blue lines.
Exactly, yes.
And is there any truth to the rumor that I heard that this is called fantasy land?
I've heard the term fan land. Fantasy land is different But you can put your copyright on that one.
Thank you.
I had a question for Katie. Is it necessary to have 3 different types of zoning? Couldn't we do a heavy zoning that would include everything?
You're talking about the surrounding parcels to the west and north?
You got IT, you got IG, and you got IL.
Right, so that's the existing zoning of surrounding areas.
That's existing.
Right, that's existing zoning. So this is all the existing zoning surrounding the site, the proposed site.
I was kind of confused when I went out there and looked at the property and then tried to figure out from the maps that we had. I mean, it's pretty difficult to try to figure out what's what. And I know I complained 2 or 3 meetings ago about the small site plans that we were looking at in our packages. So I just wanted a little more explanation on.
Well, I mean, today we're just doing the rezone and the annexation, so we'll get another shot at won't we get another shot at this site plan? Or
That would come
preliminary
later,
plat, or-
so.
Yeah, is that right, or?
Yeah, I've got a general site plan that we can certainly.
Well, you kind of been showing,
Yeah.
You're describing it, but that's generally all we're trying to accomplish today, I believe, is that, unless we feel like we need to know the layout, but since it's more of an industrial, do we really care that much about it? And it needs to be market-driven based on who you might be working with, and they will have some input on how it gets carved up in the future, I would assume. Does any of this have to, since it's the East Airport, how that's an industrial area, is that like an HOA to where now you have to be loving members of that group, or no, you can be totally independent and, okay, or even considered competing against them, or, however it might be, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have CC&Rs that go with the commercial side of it, but no competing. In fact, we want to offer on the future commercial the 2 to 3 acre product. A lot of what's out there is a little bit smaller than that, so the yard space opportunities for future users is somewhat limited. But I know there are some recent acquisitions that have taken place in that area, so it's all good industry, good job driven, good location for all of that.
So under industrial general, that allows motels, so you could have like a Motel 6, so Mike Haywood could stay out by the sewer plant if he wanted to.
Exactly.
Something like that. Isn't that right? Yeah. Okay,
George, is there a reason to have a site plan for this?
Other than just generally showing you what a layout might look like, perhaps.
Which is what a site plan typically does.
But for this particular purpose, to do his development, he's going to have to submit either a site plan to us or a subdivision plat to us that will create those additional lots that he was talking about. At this stage in the process, I don't know that it helps you to know that the building's going to be 85 feet this way or 75 feet that way.
I agree more. I just wanted to hear you say it out loud.
Mr. Chairman, are we looking at 1 or 2 motions?
that's that question, the final map, yeah.
It's
Katie,
2
I guess I'm
motions.
still confused. What are we rezoning, and what are we rezoning it to?
So there's an initial, when you annex in, it's currently under, this proposed site is currently under county zoning. So when you annex in, then you have to assign, we have to assign a city zoning under the city zoning code. So it's, the first action is the annexation with initial zone, and then the second action is a rezone from that initial zone to the proposed zone.
And the proposed zone is IG.
Since it's county.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
I think maybe you didn't see it on, it's not on that plan where it says IG.
Yeah, here it's, so the current county zoning is residential rural for that site because it's outside of the city. So when we annex in, we have to assign it a zone that would be equivalent to county zoning, and that is rural estate 2 acre. And they wouldn't be able to do a contractor's yard, obviously, in that zone. So then we need to allow what the use that they're proposing would require a rezone to industrial general, where the contractor's yard is allowed. Yeah, so today it's two actions. It's annexation with initial zone, city zoning, and then the second motion is for rezone from rural estate 2 acre to industrial general.
Uses that we want.
So if you look at the staff report, it's in at the bottom of the staff report, the wording for the motions would be there.
Okay, is any members of the public here that is for or comments on this? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners, you ready to move this forward?
Yes.
Yep, okay, everybody got your questions? Okay, we'll entertain a motion first for the annexation.
I move that we approve the proposed annexation ANX 18-00001.
Okay,
I'll second it.
With initial city zone.
you'll second it? Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 7-0, no opposition. Second motion will be to amend the zoning.
I'll move to recommend approval of rezone PLN 18-00009.
Yep. Got it, second?
Second?
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. I believe we've completed our brief agenda for today. And does the staff have any other announcements they'd like to make?
No, sir.
Matt, you didn't get up today. Don't you have some wisdom to bring to us or anything? Nope?
Thank you for the donut.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Joe.